First, in recent days, news has started to appear outside of Syria, exposing the scale of the atrocities that are being committed against Christian minorities following the overthrow of the Assad regime last December. The images are horrific. Men, women, the elderly and children all murdered in cold blood by Islamist terrorists, including the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the HTS group, which is designated as a terrorist organisation here in Australia. This afternoon, my good friend 4BC radio host Gary Hargrave was able to speak to a Brisbane man who returned to Syria to bury his mother, who was one of those murdered. He has since had to flee to a safe country in order to speak out publicly about what is happening to Christians there.
A Brisbane bloke I know, and know well, has been directly affected. He's a real contributor to our local community, but he's in hiding right now. He's shocked by what's happened. You see, he had to rush from the safety of here in Brisbane to the murderous anarchy of Syria to bury his mother. He's witnessed this genocide. He's felt the hurt directly.
Now, accompanying this footage, which was sent to Gary, some of which I'll show you in a moment, is some truly shocking images. Understandably, this Australian Syrian man wants to remain anonymous, but here's a little of what he had to say to Gary this afternoon.
Oh, it's slaughter, mate. It's absolute slaughter. It's and everybody just silence. They have no one. They have no one. They're on the mercy of the hand of this. Unbelievable. This day after day, slaughtered every day. Children, women, men, old people. It's just indiscriminate. It's just unbelievable.
Now, these are heavily censored videos. You can understand why they were sent to Gary. Bodies on the streets. We're also sent videos of beheadings and footage of mass graves.
Now, people can't even get out. If you do, you just, they stop you and they say, what are you, a Christian? You're Alawite, you're who you are, and that's it, slaughter will happen.
As I said, horrific images that appear not to have made it to the attention of the United Nations or any other of the global bodies that purport to defend human rights. Joining me now to discuss this, Credlin regular, the author, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Ayaan, welcome to the program. I wish I had something better to discuss, but this is something that is not getting much attention amongst the Western media. So why not?
Why not is a very good question. First of all, obviously, the images you show and what's happening in Syria is shocking. But in a way, it's not shocking because 1 in 7 Christians is subjected to persecution across Muslim-majority countries. It's happening in Syria, as you say now, but also in Iraq, in Nigeria, in Kyrgyzstan, in Kazakhstan. And I mean, I really don't know why our Western leaders are silent. I suspect it is because they're afraid, because we have large numbers of Muslims living in most major Western countries. And another story that is not told, before it gets to the slitting of throats, radical Muslims begin by vandalizing churches. And an underreported story is the attacks on churches in France, in Britain, in Germany, Spain, Italy, Sweden. And it escalates from there. So I am suspicious that it is because our leadership are really afraid that some of the radical Muslims on our soil will start doing here in Western countries what they're doing in Syria and in Iraq and in Nigeria and in other places.
Look, I made the point today at a Jewish gathering, standing up for anti-Semitism is the job of every Australian, but it's a particular job of Christians too, because once they come for the Jews, let me tell you, history shows the Christians are next. And what concerns me in all of this debate, and we can speak to the Western governments, they need to do and say more, but where are the international bodies? Where's the UN here? Where's all the human rights lobby groups? They're very silent too, Ayaan.
Human rights has become a joke now. It is a good question to ask, where are these institutions? And the answer is that all of these institutions have been infiltrated by people who are beholden to the ideology of Islamism. They're the ones who pull the shots. There was a human rights body of the United Nations, and it's led by Iran and by countries like, at one time, Libya was even a part of it. So the UN as an organization is a joke. When you say when you say they're going to come for Christians, they'll come for the Jews first and then for the Christians. They did come for the Christians. On July 26, 2016, a priest in France was preaching in the Normandy church, and two 19-year-old Muslims walked in and slit his throat. So we've had all what we call terrorist attacks, are basically attacks on Christians the way they see it. Even if you're secular, they still see it as attacks on Christianity. So I think there is a very suicidal attitude towards the presence of this problem from our political leaders. But I think more and more populations are getting alarmed.
Here in Australia too, we had a radicalised young person scream out Islamic chants and attempt to slit the throat, certainly stabbed an Australian Christian bishop. Now that's died in the headlines. I'm not even sure where those charges are up to. I'll ask the question and come back to my viewers tomorrow night, but it's certainly been a feature, sadly, here in Australia too. I've got to ask you about Ramadan. I made the point last night. It's coinciding this time around with Lent. We've seen the King and Queen of England. They've attended a restaurant for a Ramadan event. We've seen them host an iftar event at Windsor Castle, the first time a Muslim event's been held there to this scale in 1,000 years. Now, the King is the head of the Church of England. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is supposed to support Judeo-Christian underpinnings of his own country. Both of those men did not acknowledge Ash Wednesday and the beginning of the Christian Lent. Why on earth are we in the West so embarrassed by our own culture?
I can't think of anything more wrong-headed than hosting the Ramadan at Windsor Castle. I'll tell you what Keir Starmer thinks this gesture is going to do. He thinks it's going to appease the Islamists, that it'll pull them towards peaceful coexistence. It's going to do the exact opposite. It's going to encourage Islamists and think, look, we're in Windsor Castle now, and the Allahu Akbar is ringing in the halls of Windsor Castle. And that is going to strengthen the resolve of Islamists to continue to proselytize, that they're going to take over Europe, that they're going to take over the West. And so I can't think of anything more wrong-headed than that. My advice to the King and to the Prime Minister and to all other Western leaders is A, to wake up, and B, to stand up for Christianity, for Christian morality, for Western values, and to make it crystal clear to the Islamists that they cannot do in the West what they're doing in Syria and in Iraq, etc. We should also tie it as a matter of policy to our foreign policy and development aid, that those countries where these things happen should get no trade or aid or relations from the West. That is how I would do it, but I'm not in charge.
We wish you were, Ayaan. I tell you what, I stand in awe of your moral clarity on these very challenging issues that are facing not just Australia, but the wider Western world. Thank you as always. See you next week.